Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for day 2 of the Summer Crafting Party mini-series. My name is Leah, and I am your moderator for today's event. Craftsy, the National Sewing Circle, the Knitting Circle, and the National Quilter Circle have all teamed up to provide a full week of live demonstrations and a bundle of free summer patterns. If you haven't done so already, make sure to download your free patterns by clicking the link in the description. Now, every day this week, a different instructor is going to stream live as we sew, quilt, knit, and decorate cookies. And they will provide step-by-step demonstrations of all of the fun summer projects that you'll be doing. If you have any questions during today's event, please leave your comments in the blue chat box below or in the chat on Facebook and YouTube. I will be monitoring the comments during the entirety of the event. Anything that is specific to the project, the step that we're doing with our instructor at the moment, I will try to slide in so we can get those questions answered in real time. But also don't be afraid to just drop a comment in the box that says hello or a more general question, and we will get to as many of those more general questions at the end of today's session. So that leads me to today's instructor. I'm going to introduce Emily Steffen. She joins us today. She's our sewing expert and National Sewing Circle instructor. Hello, Emily, and welcome. Can you please start us off by telling us just a little bit about yourself and then intro what we're going to be making today?
Yes, I'm so thrilled for all 5 of these projects. I love these week-long events that we do because I feel like I get to learn how to decorate cookies and make other fun stuff. So I'm coming to you from Wisconsin, and today we're going to be working on an awesome little zipper pouch. I have 2 kiddos at home, and I feel like through the summer especially, we end up with collections and trinkets and things we've picked up at a parade or a hike or something. So we are a big fan of ways we can organize things and put things together so that they don't get lost in my car. So today we're going to do a festive 4th of July project that is kind of a nod to the 80s, which I'm excited about.
All right, so before we jump into the demonstration, again, just a reminder that chat box is there for you the entirety of today's event. We always love to know where people are watching from, so you can always just drop in a hello and where you are joining us for today's project. But I will keep an eye on all of your questions, get to as many as possible. And I know Emily is going to be taking us step by step through today's project, and there will be some natural stopping points. So without further ado, I'm going to send it right back to Emily so we can get started.
Perfect. So you don't need a lot of supplies for this project. And quite frankly, if I'm being really honest, I raided my fabric stash and the background fabric to this is actually a towel. So you literally can go get anything to make this project, and it does not have to be red, white, and blue. Of course, this is the iconic Bomb Pop, but you could take this pattern and you could make this one big shape of your favorite color or your kid's favorite color to make it just general summer too. I feel like oftentimes when I'm making these projects, I keep that in mind to go, hey, what would work with other families or other kids that have preferences or favorite colors? So this is an option for that project. So if you've tuned into any other lives that I've done, you know that I love felt. And the reason I love felt is because it comes in awesome colors, it's super easy to sew, and you don't have to finish the edges like you would if you're doing a traditional applique. So the way this whole thing is constructed is really simple. And like Leah said, the instructions are downloadable in the link below. So you'll get the full, written instructions here and everything. So if I'm missing something or if you have questions, certainly write them down, but know that you also can rely on that. But the idea of this project is we're just gonna applique this Bomb Pop Popsicle onto a really simple zipper pouch shape. It's really that simple. So the first step would be is to grab your colors, and I chose, of course, the red, white, and blue color theme. And then, you know, like this is essentially like the little ridgy part on the Bomb Pop because it's like, you know, like a 3D shape. It's hard to get when it's a 2D. So I got essentially, these are like the shadow colors. So it's a traditional red and then a maroon, white, and then gray is my shadow. And then this is more of like a cerulean blue with like a royal blue as the shadow. And then of course, whatever you want for your popsicle stick. So I've pre-cut some of these pieces, which I have right here, and I'm just gonna give you a little bit of a caveat. So we realized that the sizing on here, let me just show you for a second. I'm telling you this because I feel like you totally can make this happen. The sizing on the actual pattern is bigger than this. So just a little bit of a hiccup that we have, and I will show you how to adjust that, and or you can check back later and we will have the actual size. If you want to do it right along with us, just simply print this out and scale it down. I would say probably 50 to 75% on your printer in the little printer box, and you won't have an issue. Or you could keep this large size and just make your background larger if you wanted to make more of like a tote or something. But I have cut out some of these shapes already. Whoa, they're sticky. It's like flannel graphs, with the felt boards, if you did that when you were a kid. So in theory, it's just these 3 shapes, right? And the cool thing about the way we're gonna applique it, and I'm gonna show you this is super adjustable. So you can see my shapes are not perfect. I did use the pattern to cut these out, but I didn't make these shapes absolutely perfect because it'll all be trimmable as we're sewing on the sewing machine. So I do need to cut out the last little bit of this gray to finish our bomb pop piece. So this is 3/4 of an inch wide. And again, you can use the pattern that you have or just cut it on your rotary, which is easier in my opinion. Ta-da! And Lee, if we have any questions, pipe in, please. So I know often people ask about the felt kind and the colors and things like that.
So far, just a few hellos. We've got people as far north as Canada and all the way down to Alabama viewing. So again, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in, and I'll get them to Emily whenever they come up.
Perfect. Awesome. Okay, we're just going to keep trucking along. So this is, once you have this cut out, the next step is to cut out your background and your lining fabric. I just did a plain blue in the lining here. Just easy, right? You can do anything you want. It's super, super simple. It can be cotton, it could be linen, it could be corduroy, it could be felt also. Anytime I'm making these pouches, I feel like the availability of the fabric you have is the fun part, right? Like you can make this any color or any fabric you want, and that's what I love, because it's as long as it's washable. Let me say that, as long as it's washable, because if you have kids like mine, you'll want to wash this stuff. So I've already cut out the lining, which is 10 by 17.5. You can, like I said, size this pattern down or up. If you want to make a cute little coin purse, you could size this down. If you want to do this exact size, cut it 17 by 10.5. And that's exactly what the bomb pop will fit right on top. So I mentioned that I used a towel for the background, and I was in my sewing room going, do I make this red? Do I make it white? Do I make it blue? And that's the fun part, is picking out all these fabrics. And I remembered that I had these extra indigo dyed towels that my son and I did over quarantine last year, and we made fabric napkins out of them, and I just had a few extra towels left over, and truthfully, all they are the flour sack towels, I think is what they're called. They're just very typical white towels that we dyed. And I feel like tie-dye is the latest and greatest thing that is bringing me back to my childhood. So anytime I can incorporate it into a project, I'm all about it. So I lazy cut. I don't know if there's anybody else out there that does this. Once I've measured one piece, I don't remeasure. I just lay it right on top and cut. So I'm just gonna follow exactly what I already measured of this lining fabric. And I should have put a sharper blade on this, but I cannot be the only one out there on the planet that gets too excited for projects and doesn't check the sharpness of my rotary blade.
Now, while you're showing the cutting, Emily, we have our first question here from Corinne. Corinne is curious, what is the best thread to use with felt?
Ooh, that is a great question. So I'm sure there's many different opinions out there, and if anybody feels like they want to pipe in about a different idea or thought, please do in the comments. But I tend to really like 100% cotton thread on almost everything I do. I know that there is a huge school of thought behind poly thread, or like a, more of a non-natural fiber thread. But I feel like 100% cotton thread works really well across different substrates. Like for instance, right now we are sewing felt onto cotton, or whatever this fabric is. I don't really know what this towel fabric is. I believe it's probably cotton, but I guess there might be some linen in it. And I like cotton thread because I feel like it matches and it marries with a lot of different things. Granted, this isn't a garment and this isn't something that needs to be sized perfectly. So I do feel like probably quilters or people who tend to need things kind of more exact, maybe like the poly thread a little bit more, but I'm a fan of cotton, to be honest. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, and keep those questions coming.
Perfect. So the first thing, like I said, is to applique the popsicle, if you will, onto this background fabric. So you'll see in the instructions that the way that I'm doing this is I'm going to take off all of these. These are going to be secondary, the shadows, and you start with the white, and you're going to layer both the red and the white on top. So you can kind of eyeball it, to be honest. What I'm going to do first is so I'm eyeballing this to make sure that my dimensions of how much I'm overlapping is right, because of course a bomb pop I feel like kind of has certain dimensions. So that looks about right to me. And if you've, again, joined any of my other lives, I don't necessarily love to pin. I'm just gonna stitch, of course I moved it, just straight across right here to hold it in place. So bring it right over to my sewing machine, and I'm just gonna straight stitch. I'm sewing on a Gnome, which I love. And the thing with, you'll notice, you're gonna see this live here. The thing with felt that can be tricky is that it is a thick substrate. So sometimes what you have to do is exactly what I just did. You start your stitch here and you kind of notice that your fabric isn't being pulled by your feed dogs right away. So I just pick up my needle and my foot and then kind of get the bulk out of the way to keep going straight. You won't notice it. I'll show you here. You don't notice it at all when you've stitched it. You're not missing a stitch or anything. And I just noticed I sewed that crooked, but that is okay because this is why we keep scissors handy to trim the sides.
While you're really trimming, you've got a couple fans of felt and wool. You've got a thumbs up on the cotton thread idea.
Good.
And Anna adds that she has polyester felt, so she uses poly.
Perfect.
And for wool, she hand stitches using pearl cotton. So lots of ideas to get asked about.
Like pearlescent cotton, or pearl like a fancy pearl fabric or something? That sounds...
Anna, let us know what you mean by that.
Yeah, that sounds fancy. I'm also using very thick felt, which may be the reason why I sometimes struggle to get it underneath my feet right away. And it's not that the sewing machine can't handle it, it's just that it's a lot of bulk in one little spot. So again, I'm just gonna trim up this side, because see how the side is a little bit weird. The one thing I have to say about sewing with felt is it moves more than any other fabric, which is, I don't mind it. Because again, I'm not an exact sewer. I feel like we've gone over this every time. So, okay, so
yesterday's project, this was talked about in yesterday's project, the challenges with sewing with felt.
Yes, yes. It can see, because you even saw how like I can move it. So if you really feel like you want to be precise, you can pull your felt and kind of readjust it if you really want to. I don't mind it. Okay, so bomb pop is pulled together. So the next step is to put on your stripies or your shadows. So like I said, we're gonna adjust this as we go. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna sew one line of shadows first and then the second line of shadows. And I'm gonna show you a little trick that I use with a pin. Some people are probably like, oh, this is old news, but I'm still gonna show it to you. Because I'm not sewing these pieces underneath, which you could have done, but I didn't necessarily want them to flip under, blah, blah, blah. So what I'm gonna do is just line these up as we sew, and I'm gonna go really slowly as I'm transitioning the colors and hold my pieces with my pin. You see I'm doing that, hold my pieces with my pin so that it makes the line up perfectly, because felt can move when you're sewing it, so this will help it stay in place. So I'll pin it first and then I'll use a second pin to keep it in place. Does that make sense? If this doesn't make sense, please comment, because I want to make sure I'm saying it properly. And I'm just going to lay them both out for right now, even though I'm not going to sew them both at the same time. And then trim. Add this guy. Because you want it to be nice and tight up there. Trim. Whoops, don't trim the pin. And then blue. So you're gonna go all the way down off the bottom of the bomb pop. So this one I'm just gonna leave and I can trim it later. Okay, so again, take your extra pin and hold it in place as you're bringing your foot along these outside. And you're just really closely gonna top stitch towards the top. Leah, does anybody have any questions about this? Because I feel like I maybe said it confusingly.
No questions about that section, but there's a comment here that maybe you could talk about now that you're sewing again. Lorna says that you could maybe try a walking foot for the slipping of the felt that you've talked about.
You
what do you
totally could. That is actually a really good idea. I love that idea. So a walking foot, for people that don't know, is a foot that kind of separates and literally walks like this across your fabric. A lot of quilters like it because you can sew more bulky things or other fabrics like leather or quilting, batting, things that are thicker, typically.
And then what do you think about using a stick glue instead of pins?
You totally could. That was something actually I was going to mention. You could use interfacing or a stick glue. I tend to not love glue. I've not had the best luck with it, I'm just gonna be honest, because it, to me, adds bulk that I don't love. Like, maybe I'm putting it on wrong. Every time I've tried it, I feel like I don't like it. So maybe there's tips that somebody else can share with me that I don't know about. So I'm holding this red piece, excuse me. Ta-da! And as I'm going, excuse me, around the corners, I'm lifting my foot so that it gets that bulk out of the way. And again, a walking foot would be perfect, probably. Dun, dun, dun.
Well, we have a fantastic idea here in the comments.
Ooh, I want to hear.
Because I'm pretty sure that you can find these on ice cream trucks for offer. Christine wants to make some of these as a small version to tuck in some ice cream truck money.
Oh my gosh, that is a great idea. You could make them even for like your belt loop or something. That is an awesome idea. I love it. Okay, so look at, as we can see, this just went right around. Right here is a little bit long on the side, so I'm just gonna trim up this gray shadow piece. I feel like my daughter would love that ice cream truck money idea so much. Ta-da!
To follow up, Darla is asking, could you use fusible tape to keep those shadow lines in place, or will that not work so well with felt?
You could. Okay, so here's also something maybe I should have mentioned with felt. there's two different kinds of felt. There's polyester or a poly blend felt, and there's 100% wool felt. The thing that's tricky with felt is heat. So it's not that it's like a no-no, it's just that if you're gonna use a interfacing that needs to be set with heat, you might melt your felt. So I feel like the glue idea would be a really good idea. Now, here's the thing that you could do. You could totally skip the felt idea and do cotton, and then all you'd have to do is do some sort of applique stitch around the edge, because you'd have to finish your edges so that they don't fray, one, and two, then you'd want to like tuck everything in. But you could use an interfacing if you wanted to do that. That'd be awesome, because that would solve your problem if you are feeling like it's too tricky to keep it in place, or if you wanted to use different kinds of colors, or if you didn't have felt readily available. You could adjust this pattern and make it suit to what you have sitting around already in your fabric room. And if you didn't do felt, you easily could do a fusible interfacing, 100%.
Okay, great. And just a heads up, when we go back to the sewing machine, we've got two questions. Interest in what size needle it is that you're sewing with, and what is the foot that you are using. So when we get back over to that shot, if you could let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just doing the same and lining this all up. And I'm realizing my math is clearly off on my gray piece because it's wider. I'm just gonna trim this. Ta-da, there we go. Okay, so here is the never-ending question, I feel like, about feet. Each sewing machine company, or excuse me, needles. Each sewing machine company will recommend different needles. I love just like the standard, I don't know what size this is, but Gnome has blue, yellow, red, and black, I believe, needles, and they'll tell you on the packaging what it's supposed to be used for. The only other size needle I've ever used is a twin needle, which is like how you'd finish out garments. This is just the standard blue needle, red needle that you can sew kind of just about anything. It's just a general needle. So I don't know what size actually. That's something maybe I need to brush up on. And then the foot I'm using is just the Gnome A foot, which is just their straight stitch foot. Anytime you have your sewing machine, you will have the option, most sewing machines have the option of zigzag stitches and stitches that are offset a little bit. This is just a straight stitch that I typically like to use with felt, because the reason I love felt is you can layer it and guide it and essentially kind of like draw with it and paint with it, which is a little bit what we're doing today.
And then last question, what color thread are you using for this stitching?
This is great. I'm using white. I like to not match my thread to my project because, this got off a little bit, because I don't like to. So I'm using white, but you 100% could use black or gray or anything for these darker areas and kind of think about the picture and use whatever you wanted. Look at that. So I'm just going to trim up this bottom part and ta-da. So we have our little bomb pop guy. Now, all we're going to do is adhere this or sew this to the outside, the front outside. So what I'm going to do is tuck in, I just put these needles away and I need them. Tuck the popsicle stick, ta-da, just like that. Tuck it under. And I did this, I don't know if you watched, we did a live in February, I believe, something like that. And I did a lip zipper pouch. And I went around the outside of the zipper pouch a couple different times because I really like the way that the fabric and the stitches on the fabric looks like it's kind of sketchy. I'm going to do the same today. Because if we start here, we can go all the way around, if we start here, we can go around here and then go all the way around 2 times, which is what I'm going to do so that it adheres all of it. And also I just really like the look of it. So you do not have to do this if you don't want to. Either way, and again, if you don't want even the stitch look, that glue idea that somebody else was throwing around earlier would 100% work as well. I've, like I said, not had luck with the glue. So I'm just gonna come back over here to the sewing machine, use my straight stitch, top stitch, which means stitch pretty close to the edge. Whoops, I'm backwards. And just slowly guide all the way around the outside. A question I also often get is about backstitching. And when I'm appliquing, and maybe again somebody else can make a comment in the comments about this, I don't tend to backstitch or anchor my stitches too much, just because I don't feel like it is necessary, super necessary. But maybe there's another school of thought, I'm not sure. I'm gonna use a pin again to get this underneath my foot. Now I'm really questioning this walking foot idea, because that feels like that could solve my problem. I have one too.
Anyone is trying it while you're watching and it's a success, let us know in the comments.
Yes, please.
These things.
And you probably can hear the sewing machine as it goes over these seams a little bit, that it's working a little harder. And as I'm getting towards the top, I'm just lifting up my foot, but keeping my needle in place, just to make sure that it stays flat to the background fabric as we're sewing, because felt can move.
Well, we have another idea here in the comments.
Yeah.
Rather than making this smaller, Jennifer wants to make it larger and line it with dollar store vinyl tablecloth so that you could use it as a bathing suit wet bag.
Okay, that's a great idea. Here, I made wet bags for my kids last year, and I love the idea of a dollar store tablecloth because duh. And it was one of the best things on the planet that I've ever made for my children because I didn't have smelly swimsuits in my car all summer. I love that idea.
There's a question coming in again about tape.
Yeah.
Sherry wants to know if single fold bias tape could be used for the shadows.
Oh my word, yeah. It 100% could. The only thing I would make sure about, because bias tape in theory is just a cotton, I mean, I guess it could be something else, but bias tape is typically just cotton. You just have to make sure that your edges stay tucked under. Yeah, which it would with bias tape. I'm thinking out loud a little bit here, but I feel like it totally would. That's a great idea. So I went around twice, and I'll show you what I mean by this sketchy look. The other thing this does, if you do this sort of multiple passes, is you don't have to have your stitches perfect, which I really like. I'm all about the fun of sewing rather than the perfection, if you haven't guessed with that. Okay, ta-da, look it. So you can see, it's probably easier to see up here. You can see how this outside stitching makes it look all cute and fun and move. The movement of the stitches is what I really like. So I'm gonna trim my edges. Is this making sense? Does anybody have any questions about any of this part? No, maybe.
We don't have any in here yet, but as always, keep them coming. Even if you think that it's a silly question, I promise you, you're probably not the only one wondering.
Okay, so the next thing we're gonna do is the zipper. I didn't mention this about the zipper before, but again, if you've been on any other live with me, you know that I tend to buy these zippers in, I don't even know what sizes they are. I have no clue. But you can cut your zipper. This is a plastic tooth zipper. So this part's metal, but this part is plastic. So just keep that in mind so you don't ruin your scissors if you're gonna do this. I buy these because A, I love that I can buy a lot of zippers at one time, but B, then I can cut my zipper to any length I want. So if you already have a 17 and a half inch zipper, awesome. If not, do this step with me. So I'm gonna lay out my zipper along my long edge of where it's gonna go, and then simply cut it. There we go. Ta-da. And this part right here, this stopper part, is what we're gonna mimic right here just by sewing back and forth a couple times. Because in theory, this is gonna get tucked into the very edge of your bag, but you still wanna add a little stopper just in case something happens. So go back over to your sewing machine. And you're just gonna go back and forth, and it doesn't have to look pretty because you're not gonna see it. So I'm just going forwards, backwards a few times, cut it, and see, it's just that little white edge, and let me show you. This is sort of magic. I can't get it off. I'm sure there's some sort of moment or trick if your kid like broke its zipper on its jacket where you could do this, but I haven't figured that out yet. Okay. So then now this project just becomes a simple zipper pouch. So you will layer your, I have to say this, outside top up zipper. No, that's wrong. Sorry. Lining. It goes lining, zipper, top down. I do it wrong every time. So lining, I'm going to do it like this so you can see. Lining, zipper, outside. So we're going to flip it so that it's right sides up. Like this. And then just line up your 3 layers. And these things are my favorite. I'm blanking on the name of these. I forget. Claw clips. I don't remember what they're called. If you remember, make a comment. And they're great because you don't have to pin with your zipper, and they're easy to take off.
Now, while you're clipping, little reminder for viewers, if you haven't checked out the chat box yet, our team has just dropped in a few links you might be interested in. Somebody was wondering if you could go back and look at that zipper pouch that you mentioned with the lips, Emily.
Yes.
Yes, you can. You can go and view that. It is still available. The link is now in the chat box. And if you are wondering where to get your pattern for this project or any of this week's projects, that link is in there as well so that you can go and download what we're working on today.
Okay.
And they're called Wonder Clips, I think.
Oh,
Kathy.
Yes. That is totally what they're called. I feel like, yep. So this is just what it looks like. And all this is, see, you're just kind of clipping it all in place. So lining, zipper, outside, right sides down. Oh, hello. I need to change my foot to my zipper foot. And all a zipper foot does, if you're new to sewing, is it allows you to get really, really, really close to the zipper teeth when you're sewing. So it kind of takes the side edgy bulk part out of the foot. So I always start my zippers by anchoring my stitch and back stitching a little bit because it's a zipper and it's going to be used and pulled on quite a bit. And then I'm just following the feel of the tooth of the zipper along the edge of the foot and taking off the clips as we go. These clips are awesome because you don't have to stab yourself with pins as you're trying to work with your zipper. The one tip that I share every single time is the pull on the zipper is going to give you bulk. So if I just continue to sew straight right here, I'm going to run into the pull of the zipper. So what I will do is kind of strategically, it's hard to see, but open the zipper so that the pull gets out of the way past the foot, maybe. It's like a delicate unzipping moment here. There we go. And then reline it back up. And you can lift your foot out of the way if you have to. Sometimes I'm able to get it out of the way without the foot there. And then back stitch at the end. Ta-da! See, so, whoops, I'll show you this way. Because we moved that pull out of the way, our stitch is nice and straight. Otherwise it would have been like whoop and then that way. So I'll close this back up and then do the exact same thing as before. This is kind of a big pouch, so it's a little bit tricky. So now this piece, whole piece, becomes our zipper. So it's lining, zipper, and then there's no really right or wrong side to this. So again, right side's down, and then just line it all up, just like we did before. So you're kind of making a sandwich. And just make sure everything is nice and flush to the edges and to the zipper edge, which I'm gonna open this up right away actually. That will get that bulk out of the way. Does anybody have any questions about zippers? I feel like they're intimidating.
You know what? We don't have any questions
Love it.
just yet. So probably everybody's just watching really closely for all of these.
Everybody's zipper pros is really what it means.
But definitely ask your questions, especially with zippers. I know, Emily, you've got so many good tips with these. I'll ask you a quick one here, but always keep more zipper questions coming. So Donna is curious if you've ever thought of using a Teflon foot.
Oh, I mean, okay, here's the thing I feel like I have to say that I've learned about sewing. There's so many ways to end up with the same result and get it done differently. Does that make sense? There's a saying, something about like 5 ways to skin a cat or something, maybe. It's true with sewing. But I think a Teflon foot probably would work because it would handle the bulk, and it would navigate really well. I'm sure that would be great. My sewing machine came unthreaded. So I'm gonna thread it really quick. Maybe. The amount of feet that can make your life easier is awesome with sewing. And I feel like, in all transparency, I haven't explored all those options. So I love that you're giving me suggestions. Okay, back to sewing this guy. So backstitch, and then remember I already opened my zipper a little bit so I can feel the pull right here. So I'm gonna come up kind of close to it and then get it out of the way. So I'm gonna open it. You can see maybe a little bit better with this angle. I'm just gonna close the zipper back up just to get that pull out of the way as I'm sewing. Put my foot back down. And
Emily, while you're sewing, Em has a question here.
Yeah.
What do you like about your sewing machine?
Ooh, okay, so my favorite feature, this is the Gnome 9450. And it has it's not just a quilting machine or certain machines have certain, I guess, specialties. And this one is kind of a jack of all trades. My favorite feature is just what I did, where I can push a button and it cuts the thread. Which I know sounds very lame, but it's really the little things that are super great. And I really love how versatile this machine is. I feel like in the world of all the different brands of sewing machines, I've loved how versatile this machine is, and it's a workhorse. I don't do my best at cleaning the machine, and it's still amazing. So I love it. Okay, so now I'm gonna do is iron. You see how this kind of bulks up? You don't want that to be like that because you don't want your fabric to get stuck in your pull. So all I do is kind of pull it away from the edges, or pull the fabric along the edges away from the zipper. And then I'm just gonna give it a really quick press with the iron. You don't have to do this stage, but I feel like it will give you a really nice finished zipper edge, if that's a thing you say. Because what we're going to do is top stitch really quickly to make sure the fabric stays away from the zipper forever and ever, amen. Because if you were just to close up the zipper pouch right now, likely you would get the fabric stuck in the teeth, which would be a tragedy if you're at a parade trying to get to your popsicle or your whatever is held inside of here. I guess popsicle wouldn't be held in here. Sucker. So we're just going to top stitch right along the edges here, right on top. And we are nearing the end of this project. It's a quick project.
Perfect. That means we have about 20 minutes before we'll get to the end of the hour. So if you have been holding on to any more general questions that aren't necessarily project specific, you can start dropping those into the chat box and we'll get to those after Emily finishes up the project with whatever time we have left.
Perfect. These are the moments. This is, I just taught my son who's 9 how to sew last year over quarantine. And it was little straight stitches in bigger projects like this that I had him sit at the sewing machine and help me with. And he thought he was, solving the hardest math problem by doing it. It was awesome. But these straight stitches that you can kind of just let your machine do the work and teach your kids how to guide it, he was super into it. It's a cool moment to give them confidence if you're interested in teaching a kiddo how to sew. It lasted about 5 minutes and then he was over it, but it was a win in my book. Okay, perfect. And I'm not back stitching or anything because it's just to keep that fabric away. So, biggest step, which is next, you can clip your threads if you want to, but the very biggest thing you have to do is open your zipper, because if you sew it shut, it's really hard to open the zipper. Because we're going to open this up and now stitch all the way around the entire outside. Here's a tip when you are lining up these edge parts for the zipper, these parts right here, is you will want to make sure that your zipper, right? Okay, so if we're going to think about it, and this is how your bag is going to be when it's open, you want your zipper to be this way. So this is a minor little thing, but I promise it'll make your zipper pouches look better in the long run. That means you want your zipper to lay towards your outer fabric, right? So if you're sewing it together, you could sew it like this, or you could sew it like this. And I would recommend sewing it like this, which means when you're opening it up, you want the edges to lay towards your outer fabric, because that's what's going to give it that finished look that looks like the zipper is turned all one direction. If you have questions about that, let me know, because I know that is kind of not making maybe 100% sense. I'm going to use these little clippies and clip them in place so that they hold, because I want to make sure, again, see, I want the zipper to go this direction, not this direction. It's a minor thing. Like I said, it's minor, but it'll make it look better when it's all done. You want your zipper to pop out the top rather than be tucked under. Or maybe you want it to be tucked under. I guess maybe if it's an invisible zipper. Okay, here we go. I guess you also could alter the shape of this pattern and follow the popsicle too, if you really wanted to. That'd be fun.
Now,
Okay.
I know you're not stitching the felt any longer, but there is a question about stitching on felt. Cecilia was wondering if there's a specific stitch length that you recommend when you're sewing with felt.
Oh, okay. So I typically go with the default stitch length here, but okay, so this actually, that's a good question, because it could solve the problem of the bulk of the fabric. Like if you don't have a walking foot, if you're struggling with getting your fabric through the foot in this little like throat space, I guess, if you will, you could lengthen your stitch length, which means your stitches aren't going to be this close together. They'll be, this close together, because that would allow more fabric to come through before your needle tries to go through. I feel like the magic of stitch length is you want to get your stitches as close together to make sure that it holds, but not so close that it's causing your fabric to pucker. So, whoa. The joys of live crafting. This has happened to everybody before, guaranteed. Watch. Ta-da! It's a thread nest, which this is how I deal with these. Undo part of your bobbin thread, which means it's quite a bit here. So I'm just going to take out my other bobbin and get rid of all the thread. I always unthread my machine and then rethread it back in. So drop a new bobbin in or drop in a freshly not clustered up bobbin, rethread your machine, and away you go. Maybe, there we go. I feel like the most common question is with sewing, my sewing machine is giving me that error, and it happens all the time to every single human being that sews.
Yes, and while we're watching you handle that, another reminder, if you're just joining us or you joined us midway through today's project, you absolutely are going to be able to access this video later. So maybe you were watching today and you're going to be sewing a little bit later. You can pull this back up, follow the link in the chat box, and it will be there for you.
Perfect. I just had to turn my machine off to get my foot out of the way. It was stuck in a weird spot. So that'll happen to anybody, promise you, forever and ever. And then all I'm gonna do is clip. If I had a seam ripper, I could do this, but I'm just gonna clip this part out. This is the joys of sewing, is you make a mistake, you pull it out, you try again. There we go, okay. Round 2, here we go. So remember, and notes this in the project PDF, all we're gonna do is leave an opening at the bottom of the lining so that we can flip it right out. I backstitched when I first started just because I want to make sure that whatever goes, whoops, what in the world? Whatever goes in our pouch stays in there and there's no holes in the bottom. So I was backstitched when I do that. And I just clipped my thread and it came out. Apparently I'm fighting with my sewing machine today.
Well, people are loving the way that you're using the zippers here for this.
Good. For the love. Here we go. This is the joys of live, right? Anybody can go, oh my gosh, it happens to everybody. It's not just my sewing machine. It's not just me. Okay. So around the edges, that was not a good example. But again, for anybody that's new to sewing, whenever you need to do a corner, go around a sharp corner, go around a really tight corner, you'll leave your needle in and lift up your foot, and I'll show you that. I always give myself a little bit of push when I go over those zipper parts. Some people recommend actually backstitching over those zipper, like where the zipper met on the edge. I've never done that, I don't feel like, as a rule of thumb, but you can. So needle staying down, I lift my foot up and I just pivot and turn my fabric. That just gives a nice corner. This is also another moment. My thread is gathering a little bit, but we're good. This is another little moment where you can have a kiddo sit in your lap and help. It'll give them confidence because they'll say, oh my word, I helped with that project. At least that's how my kids are. Again, stop at the corner, leave your foot down, lift up your needle. This is puckering a little bit, but we'll be okay. And you can see on this particular edge, I'll show you, that my outside must have got cut wrong because it's like maybe 1/4 of an inch bigger just on that part. But I can just trim that up. So I'm leaving a little bit of an opening, back to the beginning, back stitching a little bit, and then voila. So before I flip my project out, this is what I was talking about. This is, see how this side is a little bit wider? Something probably got measured a little bit wrong, but I always want to inspect my edges and make sure that everything is all okay. That's where my little situation happened, where my thing broke. But I'm gonna trim the edges here, trim the bulk out of the edges and the corners so that they lay nice and square. And if I really wanted to, I can clip this part that's a little bit wide. It's not necessary, but you can. And this is the fun part. Flip it. So if you didn't open your zipper, you'll be able to flip it, but then you're gonna have to wiggle your fingers on the other side and try and open it. I've done it before and it's just tricky. See, so I left an opening here because I had my zipper open. And you kind of flip it out twice because you're pulling it like this. And it feels like a ball of a mess, but I promise it'll come together. Ta-da! And then you can use a turning tool or your finger or scissors or a pencil to get your edges and your squared corners all nicely. You can even stick a needle in there and pull it out so it's nice and square. Look it, look it, look it. And there's one tiny little step before you're done. And that is to pull your lining back out and finish this part. This opening right here. So you can iron it if you want to. You can eyeball it if you want to. You can hand stitch it if you want to. You can finger press it if you want to, which is typically what I do. So you will take your corner here, or your edge, excuse me, not your corner, and you see how like you've made an invisible line on the inside. Basically, all you're gonna do is tuck this in, which it's not quite working for me right now. Here we go, this is better angle. Tuck this in and stitch the opening closed. If you really want to, you can match your thread. It's the inside of your pouch. I don't think anybody's gonna care. I'm just eyeballing it, because all you're gonna do, and my machine came unthreaded again, you guys. What in the planet? Here we go. It's always the last steps when you just wanna be done to see your finished product that you have like 400 things that go wrong. Or at least that's how it is for me anyway.
I'm going to try to sneak in a question while you're threading. If you were to iron, Darla has a question. What is underneath your iron? What are you using to iron on?
Oh, this is just a ironing pad, a pressing pad, I think is what it's called. This is the cutting board. So you would just iron, you know, like you would an ironing board or an ironing pad of any kind, just to get the seam perfectly creased. I don't really care if the seam is perfectly creased because it's the inside bottom of the zipper pouch. I care more that it's finished so that nothing falls out of the zipper pouch. You're just top stitching it closed. That's all you're doing. And if you really want to, you can match your thread. And ta-da, clip your threads. And you are done. Look at this. Now I'm imagining these cute little ones that you guys were talking about for the money for the ice cream guy. How great is that? Ta-da! We're done. It's that simple.
All right, well, we're going to move into some questions here. We've got about 5 minutes left. So starting with a pretty basic one, still somewhat relative to the project, Anne is wondering if you have any suggestions to making easy bias tape to finishing a project. It's going to be our next challenge.
That's a really good question. So bias tape in theory, okay, so track with me for a second. You can make bias tape out of anything. Bias tape is cut on the bias, so it's not cut on the direction your fabric, like if you look at the threads of the fabric, it makes a grid, right? You're cutting it diagonal and then you're gonna fold in your bias tape twice. So if you want a 1/4 inch bias tape, you're cutting an inch thick, you're folding it in half, and then in theory, you're folding each half in half so it goes like that. You can make bias tape out of anything. It takes a lot of fabric and a lot of ironing. I know there's like these contraptions where you can put them on your sewing machine or put them like through the tape and you can iron it where it will do that kind of pre-folding piece for you. But you could make your own bias tape. I buy it because I don't have that kind of time. But I appreciate people that do.
I know we had questions about bias tape earlier as well. So best of luck trying out that next challenge. All right. This is a more general question coming in from Wesley. Wesley is curious, what are your favorite projects or designs to make with felt? And then are there also some websites that you would recommend to find some interesting felt patterns?
Ooh, okay, so I feel like felt is awesome with kids. So I've made a lot of pillows or a lot of like plushies or stuffies with felt, because the cool thing, I think I mentioned this before about felt, and the reason why this project works so well is that you don't have to finish the edges. So in theory, like basic project, you could cut 2 pieces of this bomb pop popsicle, put them together, sew the outsides and stuff it, and you'd have a stuffy. So the reason I love it is because it's accessible, which translates into the fact that you can kind of do a lot with it, especially if you're stuffing something or if it's like a home decor piece or something that you don't really have to worry about like fringing or fraying or anything that can like tear it up. One of my favorite projects I've ever done is, we talked about it before, is the zipper lip pouch, and that was done with wool felt. So that's really fun because it's a whole project, an entire zipper pouch that was done with wool. I love that. That was fun.
All right, great. We have time for one more question. It's a fantastic one because you've mentioned a couple times helping teach kiddos how to sew. So I'm going to finish with M's question. M asked, Emily, how did you learn how to sew?
Ooh, I love it. So I grew up in an earth home with my parents where my mom made all of my clothes. And I didn't know that wasn't normal for kids until I got to like kindergarten and first grade, and I was like, wait a minute, you bought your clothes at the store? Like my mom made my swimsuits. Like she made everything. So people ask, oh, when did you learn how to sew? I kind of don't know because I grew up around it and my mom just kind of taught me as she was making stuff. I don't love to sew garments though, because I grew up with it and I don't like how exact it is, how precise it is, or like I should say, I don't like to sew tailored garments. That feels overwhelming and difficult. But I had learned from an early age, and I feel like the way that I was taught gave me the confidence to be able to try creative things all the time, right? Like all I had to do was put 2 pieces of fabric into the sewing machine, push the presser foot, and it went. So it gave me that confidence to go, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, but I can open up a paint can and put paint on the wall, or I can try and draw something, or I can try and make a pattern. So I love teaching my kids this stuff and having this around my kids, because maybe they won't love sewing. I don't know. Maybe they'll never touch a sewing machine after they move out of our house, but it'll give them hopefully the confidence that their ideas can become something physical, because that's kind of how I learned how to sew. And I feel like sewing for me was the entrance into a lot of the other creative things that I do. Long answer.
A perfect answer to end on. Emily, I'm going to ask if you have any final thoughts you want to leave us with before I give us a few reminders for tomorrow. So go for it.
I'm just excited about this week's series. I'm actually really excited about the cookie decorating, because every single time I watch, I feel like I try to do it and it doesn't look like the picture, but it's really yummy to eat. So I'm excited about those later this week.
All right, I'm excited as well. And that brings us to the end of our hour today. So a reminder, just like Emily said, join us again tomorrow for the Summer Crafting Party mini-series. We continue with just what Emily is looking forward to. We are streaming live with expert decorator Anne Yorks at 2 p.m. Central. So Anne is going to be providing her live demonstration on how to decorate Uncle Sam and Gnome cookies. You can download your materials list and the directions right now using the link in the description before tomorrow's event. And you can, of course, also find the entire week's mini-series schedule in the video description. Until then, and on behalf of the entire team, my name is Leah, and we will see you tomorrow.